everybody. Welcome to the Buckeye Weekly Podcast. I'm Tony Gerdeman, here as always with Tom Orr. Tom, how's it going?
Tony, it's the day we've been waiting all year for. It's the day when we find out what the College Football Playoff Committee has said this year that was absolute total garbage and what they actually meant. And this is such an interesting set of games to have going into that, because at 8 o'clock or something last night, I texted you like, boy, if things keep going this way, or 9 o'clock maybe, where it was like Penn State's getting run over and SMU's getting run over. It's like, man, here is a really clean, easy, drama-free set of rankings. I think everyone's going to be able to more or less agree. It's good matchups. You don't have a bunch of teams playing other teams from their conferences. This feels real straightforward. And then Penn State came back, and then SMU came back, and it's like, oh boy, everything's really messy again.
It's this. I was watching this and I'm thinking, this must be what Joe Lunardi feels like every day of his life. Basically, the whole bracketology, everything impacts something else. And I think we witnessed a fantastic college football regular season. And maybe that changes when there is one day an eventual great team one year where it's just like they run through everybody. But we haven't seen that this year, and there's no shortage of surprises. Great job by Penn State coming back. I think, you're watching that. It's like, I think maybe they did enough to stay ahead of Ohio State. And it's like, well, what did they do? They lost by 8 in a neutral site against Oregon, a team that Ohio State lost to on the road by 1, and they lost to Ohio State. So what has Penn State done to stay ahead? Now, I think Ohio State probably, this is where I've got Tennessee and Ohio State behind me. So I'm thinking 8, 9, but I think they should be 7 at the lowest.
Well, and so I put together a graphic today just because I think the 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 rankings are absolutely fascinating. Because if you look at these teams, what do they want to do? What do they want to reward? Because you could put these teams, you could basically put these teams in a hat and pick them out in a lineup in just whatever order you want to, and essentially be able to defend it in some way. Do you want the team that's playing the best right now? Okay, well, Notre Dame has looked really dominant the last few weeks. Do you want to reward the team that has the best body of work, the most top 10 wins, the most top 25 wins? Well, okay, you go with Ohio State there. Ohio State could be the 5 seed. Do you want to reward head-to-head? Okay, well, Ohio State has a head-to-head win over Penn State, so they should definitely be ahead of Penn State. Do you want to reward the teams that made it to the conference championship game and not punish them for losing the conference championship game, especially close? Well, okay, then you put Penn State ahead of Ohio State. Do you want to reward strength of schedule? Well, Notre Dame is the only one that's like a real outlier there. Everyone else, Texas, Penn State, Ohio State, Tennessee, they're all in the 20 to 21 to 30 range. And Notre Dame is 58. Notre Dame is closer to Indiana in terms of strength of schedule than anyone else. Do you want to reward game control? These are all metrics that the committee talks about. Top 10 wins, top 25 wins, bad losses, which means like losses to unranked teams. Strength of schedule. This is the ESPN strength of schedule metric. Game control. This is the ESPN game control metric. Like, this is all the stuff they look at. If you want to reward teams in terms of game control, you've got 1, 4, 5, 9, and 22. So Penn State would be the odd man out there. It's just, they could kind of do whatever they want. And you could go, yeah, okay, I could see how they could defend that.
Yeah, and the justifications that they've used throughout the season, they can pick and choose. They'll pick those out of a hat too, Tom, whichever ones they want to use. But, and I tweeted this earlier today, that punishing a team for losing in the conference championship is eliminating them from the playoffs. It is not moving them down. And, so I think we need to recognize that, which then puts Penn State in danger against Ohio State. Well, how can you punish them? It's like, well, there should be no easy path in the playoffs, but just be happy you're in the playoffs. And I know the committee chair, Ward Manuel, or Clark, Rich Clark, the executive director, have both talked about not punishing, or how do you handle the teams that lose in the conference championship game? Because I asked at the outset, and the answer was basically, you're not going to be rewarded for making the game, and be careful how you lose, because it will be judged. And so, I think both of these teams last night that we're talking about SMU and Penn State both lost in a solid manner. I think they did enough to remain in. Now we'll see what happens when they start talking about SMU and Alabama, comparing them. But the idea that you can't be punished for losing a game, that's not something that they expressed in the past. Now, they have talked about recently about not moving teams up that aren't playing and dropping teams below them. So, I think, as we've said, they've said a lot of things and they'll say some more, but I don't think Penn State is out of the woods here on dropping below Ohio State. I know the AP poll came out, and all praise the AP poll for having Penn State ahead of Ohio State one spot. I mean, if you're already one spot away, then does the head-to-head matter there? So I think, as I said, I think Ohio State, they'll end up 8. I think they should be 7. I think they definitely have an argument to be higher than that. And when you look at all of these teams, as you said, Tom, just look at them. Mm-hmm. And if you want to tell me who is the 5th place team, who is the fifth seed, and your answer is, well, Texas has been, 2 all season long, or however high they've been. So, can you justify dropping them more than a few spots? And it's like, well, I mean, let's look at the resume and see what they've done and what they haven't done. And what they haven't done is win a game against a top 25 team. Now, Tom, are there any SEC teams in the bottom of the rankings that they can put into the top 25 that will give Texas some wins?
Yeah, and so this is you look at this group of teams and how they sort things out with this group of teams feels like it could have an impact on what happens with 10, 11, 12, because you could drop SMU out completely. If you want to do we're going to start from absolute scratch and we're just going to look at resumes and that's it. And so at that point you can look at, well, Alabama has more good wins than SMU does. And so that's how you put Alabama in. If you're going to do that, the same thought process gets you to Alabama over SMU, gets you to Ohio State should be the 5 seed because they have more quality wins than anyone else, which if that's what they want to do, fine. If they want to do, you don't want to punish the teams for losing close conference championship games, that's fine. But you can't you're going to not punish teams for losing close conference championship games. So whatever, Notre Dame, Penn State, Texas are 5, 6, 7 in some order. You can't do that. And then also but Alabama gets in over SMU. Like you gotta kind of pick one. Now, will the committee pick one, or will they just do whatever the hell they want to do? I tend to think the committee is going to do whatever the hell they want to do. Let's real quickly, how we love to read things on this show, Tony. Let's pop up this. This is from the teleconference this week. The question was, I want to get something straight here that you said a few minutes ago on the broadcast. I want to make sure that I understand. If a team that is in the top 12 right now loses in the conference championship game on Sunday, you're not saying it would not fall out of the top 12, are you? So this would be like SMU, Penn State, Texas. So Ward Manuel says, no, sir. I'm saying in answer to the question, if you take, for example, Tennessee is ahead of SMU, Indiana is behind SMU. Tennessee will not drop below Indiana at any point. Neither team is playing. So those teams are more or less slotted in. So Ohio State is slotted in ahead of Tennessee at this point because they didn't play. Mm-hmm. But SMU could move up depending on how we evaluate the game. They could stay where they are. They could move down depending on the outcome of the game. But Tennessee and Indiana in this example would never flip. Indiana would never move ahead of Tennessee. Tennessee would never drop below Indiana because we've already evaluated them. There's not another data point because they're not playing the championship games. But he says, but could SMU drop below Alabama if it loses? Ward Manuel, potentially, yes. And they can move up above teams as well. Again, it just depends on the outcome of the game. So I go back, Tony, to the very first one of these shows, the Tuesday night shows. They put the graphic up, the first graphic that's up, and Missouri's up there as number 22 or something. And they were at that point like 6-2. And they had no wins worth of crap. And they had absolutely gotten launched into low Earth or orbit by the 2 decent teams they'd played. And they were there. And I go, okay. So what they're doing there is they're setting up, when we look at these resumes, the top 25 record, Penn State has a top 25 win because Illinois is number 22 or whatever. One of Alabama's top 25 wins is Missouri's there. So if you want to justify putting Alabama over SMU, you kind of keep Missouri right at the bottom of the rankings all year long. That's what they've kind of done. So, if you want to get conspiratorial, and Tony, we love to get conspiratorial on this show. you look at who do they have at the bottom of the rankings, and that justifies what they want to do at the top. So again, if Ohio State is 8, fine. I think there's absolutely a perfectly logical explanation for that. If Ohio State 5 or 6, I think there's a perfectly logical explanation for that. You can defend either of those. You just need to be intellectually consistent with your conversations between, your conversations between 5 and 6 and 7 you should be using the same metric to evaluate those teams as 11 and 12. Because, if you want to do, well, Ohio State needs to be 8 because they had a bad loss very recently. Well, Alabama got murdered into 1,000 pieces by Oklahoma, who is also a bad team. So you can't hold that against Ohio State and then be like, well, but Alabama, you have to look at their whole body of work. It's like, well, you got to, whatever they pick, they just have to pick one criteria and stick with it. And again, like these 5 teams, obviously, Ohio State's not going to jump Notre Dame at this point for the same reason, because of the quote we just read. There's not a change there. So Ohio State's not going to be 5, but they could be 6 or 7. I think that's defensible. Texas and Penn State, neither of them have a top 10 win. They're 0-4 combined against the top 10. Ohio State's 2-1 against the top 10, including a head-to-head win over Penn State. I think it's perfectly defensible to put Ohio State at 6, but it's also fine if they want to put them at 8. I don't think there's a huge difference there. The show is officially on. The bracket is up there. Reese Davis is wearing a suit, so it must be just about to get real, Tony.
And I think Ohio State fans would be wanting 6 because that would give them the not knowing who 11 is, but the set in the quarters, or the quarters, it would be the 3rd seed, which would probably, it'd be Boise State or Arizona State, which is I think would be a favorable matchup for what you're looking for.
Yeah, number 1 is going to be Oregon. Number 2 is going to be Georgia. So that means if you're the 7, 8, 9, or 10 seed, you're playing either Oregon or Georgia. Really, Oregon's the only one that I look at and I go, boy, that's a team you might want to avoid, because that team, that feels like the team that most is, if they got hot, they could just beat everyone. I don't think they're a lock. You saw that defense not look great against a limited Penn State offense last night, but
290 yards rushing, 292 yards rushing for Penn State.
Yeah, I think there's, I think everyone in this field is beatable. There are just teams. If Ohio State was on the side opposite Oregon and wouldn't play them until the national championship, that would not be a bad draw for Ohio State. That wouldn't be a bad draw for anyone. I'm sure everyone would rather be on that half of the bracket potentially than being on the top. Although number 5, we'll see what the actual bracket is. But right now, number 5, if it's Notre Dame, you're probably playing like a 4-loss Clemson team, 3-loss Clemson team, and then Arizona State. Like you could play your first 2 games in the playoff without playing a legitimate like top 8, top 10 kind of team this year, which that is about as good as the draw would get for you. Tony, some exciting news. Georgia apparently won the SEC. Oregon won the Big 10. Arizona State won the Big 12. It appears that Clemson won the ACC, but
I hate that you're like 45 seconds ahead of me and you're spoiling all of these things for me.
Sorry. Exclusive must credit Buckeye Weekly podcast. They're apparently doing this from the Mercedes-Benz Stadium in Atlanta, I think, or they're showing an exterior shot of Mercedes-Benz Stadium in Atlanta. Either way,
B-roll.
Did you enjoy Kirby Smart complaining about the SEC making them play 4 road games?
I did. It's amazing.
Literally every power conference team did.
Mm-hmm. He is amazing, and he did it right there while Sankey is there to listen to him.
Well, let's hit this super chat real quick before the show starts. Ryan Dawes says, not to derail too much, but is it weird? It is weird to me that players from Ohio State are transferring before the first playoff game. I understand not wanting to play Missouri last year. Obviously, the sort of end of that thought is, but you're missing out on the college football playoff and the chance to win a national championship. And I think, Tony, to me, it's really all about, well, where are you going next and how many spots are available in those places? And will one of those schools, if you back channel with, pick a team, you're going in the portal and you think you might want to go to Cincinnati or a MAC school or whatever, could you just kind of have a back channel communication and just say, yo, save me a spot? Yeah, of course you could. But you probably want to get in there and just sort of move on with stuff and be set up and ready to go. Because if you wait until after, if Ohio State goes to the semifinals or the final, you could be looking at the end of January if you wait all the way through there to go into the portal. And then you potentially miss the spring semester there. So if you're not thinking you're going to play a big role, all the guys that are going in the portal so far have really been special teams guys for Ohio State. So, you may just value, let me find the next spot, let me land there, let me set myself up for success next year by getting in there as quickly as possible.
Yeah, and Ohio State's not the only team that this is happening to. I mean, I do think it is a surprise that people are bailing already, but as you said, they don't necessarily play offense or defense. They're just out on special teams here and there. And so, these are guys that can be replaced and will be replaced. But yeah, I am surprised because I've seen some from Georgia and other places. And yeah, the timing of it is bad, but these guys are already on the fringe and they're probably like, I want to be off the fringe as much as possible. So I'm going to land somewhere as quickly as possible or get my name out there as quickly as possible. Even like there's stuff going on behind the scenes. We've heard about Miller Moss to Michigan for about the last month, things like that. It's like, why is that already a thing? Riley Leonard last year to Notre Dame by like October. It's like, what, how is this even a thing? And it's like, well, then it eventually happens, and you're like, oh gosh, I guess there are back channels. I thought that was against the rules, but apparently not.
Yeah, well, it's like when baseball teams sign these international free agents, and it's like somehow people all know who's signing with which team and what the number is like a year and a half before they're legally able to sign. Like, how is that possible? Like, well, it's the same way that the portal opens and someone is in the portal and everyone already knows where they're going. Who was the you just talked about Riley Leonard, right? I mean, yeah, there were a couple guys last year that were like that, where the portal hadn't opened and everyone already knew where they were going. It's like, that's curiouser and curiouser. That is so strange. Going through Nick Saban.
I think that also tells us that Notre Dame is probably going to go with an internal quarterback next year, because we haven't heard about, because we heard about, I think, Sam Hartman and Riley Leonard both well before they happened, and we haven't heard anything.
I'm pretty sure that Marcus Freeman came out and said they were going with an internal guy. I'm pretty sure I would take CJ Carr and give you the field and feel pretty good about it. I'm pretty sure he explicitly came out and said that in the last week or so.
Because they got a guy from New Jersey too, right? That they played a little bit.
Yes. But that was last year. They have another one this year too. I don't know. We'll see. And then the other thing that's kind of interesting here that we can talk about as we're waiting for them to get on with it is we've talked about the fact that, boy, you could set up a really interesting playoff if you can avoid having rematches of games that have already happened this year, or matchups of games between two SEC teams or two Big Ten teams or whatever in the first round. And we had a conference call with the CFP folks right before the first rankings were released. So this was like late October, early November. And they were asked a couple different times, will you sort of monkey with the rankings a little bit, put your finger on the scale maybe a little bit, just to, if there's two teams and, one of them could be 9 and one of them could be 10, would you maybe just sort of like put your finger on the scale just a little bit to make sure that you don't have a rematch? And you kind of got like 3 different answers where it was like, no, yes, and then maybe. And it was like, okay, like today's the day we're going to find out. Because if you look at the numbers, you could very easily set up a scenario where an SEC team plays, Texas plays SMU, and Notre Dame plays Indiana, and Ohio State plays Tennessee, and Penn State plays Clemson, and you have no intra-conference games at all. You have no rematches at all. And you could, you want to shuffle Ohio State and Penn State in that scenario. Sure, like whatever. You can shuffle these teams around and sort of make the pieces fit, especially because it looks probably maybe like you're going to have 2 ACC teams, and it's not just plus an independent, and it's not just going to be 5 Big Ten teams and 5 SEC teams or whatever.
Well, and now you're looking at like Penn State probably won't drop to an 8, because then in the second round you'd be looking at a rematch with Oregon. But Ohio State at 8, you'd still be looking at that same rematch with Oregon. 7-10, you're probably looking at Ohio State and Indiana, and do they want to avoid that? They told, I don't know if it was Clark or Ward Manuel, they said the commissioners have expressly told us don't worry about rematches and things like that. They've asked them not to worry about that, and that's all well and good. But they also know this is a television product, and so like how much of that is part of the thinking, because we see it in March Madness every year where you've got like the intriguing matchup of the young coach against his former coach or whatever, where it's like, oh, that's crazy that they put those two together, that they've, they have this rivalry, and oh, there they are in the second round. How fortuitous, how random, and so how random really will this be, and how much, if it's moving 6-7 and 7-6, I don't think anybody's going to be up in arms if it gives us a better product and just makes it even. I mean, this is going to be fun enough, but just makes it a little, adds a little spice, a little sugar.
Yes. They're still, Tony, they are once again going back to remind you, in case you've forgotten, who won the conference championship games.
Okay.
So let's get this one from Silver Goose. I don't understand why Buckeye fans have such a vendetta against Bama and are just praying they don't get in. I don't think there's a vendetta against Alabama. I think it's just Alabama is extremely, extremely on the edges of the field this year. And they're on the edge of the field this year, not because there's a big, massive anti-Alabama conspiracy. It's because they lost a bunch of football games this year. And it's because they lost multiple games. If you look at the graphic we had up earlier of, bad losses to unranked teams, Alabama has 2 of those. No one else on that graphic, which is the teams right above them, has 2 of those. And Alabama has they lost to. Oops, sorry, I'm looking at the wrong team. Hang on. They lost to 40-35 to Vanderbilt, which is famously Vanderbilt. Mm-hmm. They lost 24-17 to Tennessee, which is a playoff team, but a 9th seed kind of playoff team. And 2 weeks ago, they lost 24-3 to Oklahoma, which is a 6-6 team. I mean, it's the good wins for Alabama this year are they beat Wisconsin on the road, which Wisconsin's like a 6-6. They weren't even bowl eligible, right? I think they were 5-7. So that doesn't look great. You beat Georgia 41-34. So there's a good win. Beat South Carolina 27-25. Beat Missouri 34-0. But Missouri is, I mean, everyone knows what Missouri is. Missouri has been the example we've given all season in terms of like, this team has no business anywhere near the top 25, but they're being put into the top 25 just to prop some teams up. And Alabama is one of the teams they're sort of propping up with that. But you lost by 3 touchdowns to a 6-6 Oklahoma team 2 weeks ago. 3 touchdowns. This was not like came down to one play in a very close game. No, Alabama was like, it was like their controller disconnected for that game. That they were just not. They were an NPC in that game. And after that, you beat Auburn. But, the rest of your month is you beat Mercer. Congratulations. One at LSU, which, lots of teams beat LSU. 6-6. USC beat LSU this year. It's just this is not an Alabama team that has a great resume. They're fine. They have as many good wins as anyone else, but they also have some terrible losses. And if you're just going to go with, well, they have a bunch of good, they have a couple of good wins and putting Alabama in, I mean, that's fine. You can defend that, but then you've got to take Ohio State and you've got to put Ohio State like 5 or 6, because Ohio State has more good wins than anyone else on this graphic. So it's fine. I'm not saying it's going to be the greatest miscarriage of justice in history if Alabama gets in, but you have to give yourself a very particular narrative in terms of how you're choosing the field to put Alabama in over SMU right now. If that's what you want to do, that's fine. But there's like one path, and that's obviously the way Alabama folks want to structure the conversation is, well, SMU hasn't beaten anyone. It's like, well, they haven't really lost to anyone terrible yet this year either. We've seen, Tony, plenty of years when Ohio State, this was the staple of the late Urban Meyer era, was you win all your games all season, you look great, and you just poop down your pants in one game against a bad team. At Iowa, at Purdue, and that kept you out of the 14 playoff. And that was the one game where you pooped your pants. It was not, you also pooped your pants against Vanderbilt earlier in the year. It's so, they're putting the resume comparison for Alabama and SMU up there right now. And, I mean, it's like, it's fine. The strength of record is for Alabama is 9th, SMU's 15th. Strength of schedule, Alabama is much better, which is why everyone wants to strike. Greg Sankey keeps talking about strength of schedule. Win-loss over teams over 500, 5-1 versus 5-2. But that's just a real nice way to say Alabama's lost 2 games to teams under 500.
Well, so that's the thing. Alabama's record against teams with a non-winning record, meaning 500 or under, is 3-2 this season. So like what are we talking about? And in terms of like a bias against Alabama here or with the fans or with the Big Ten, I think there's I think Nick Saban got the benefit of the doubt so often, and he got some incredible breaks in his time in Alabama that, do they need every break? Do they need all of the breaks? I don't think so. And I think there's also just an anti-SEC, like, come on, like we mentioned with the Jimbo, or not Jimbo, Kirby Smart saying, it's unfair for us. Why do we have to go on the road half of the season in the SEC? And it's like, I mean, that's what happens.
Everyone does. Yes. And if you're not happy with the number of home games you play, stop scheduling neutral site games just to open the season. Like they played Clemson at a neutral site. Now they played Clemson in Atlanta, just like, and then they played Georgia Tech in Atlanta. And then they played last night in Atlanta. So it's like, how many times did you leave the state of Georgia this year? 4. So, okay. You've played 9 games in the state of Georgia, including 3 games in Atlanta, which is basically like when UConn plays in Hartford in basketball instead of playing in Gamble Pavilion. It's like, listen, it's basically a home game. Maybe, I will stop speaking Northeasterner and I will speak Southerner. It's like when Arkansas used to play at Little Rock, and it's like, well, it's basically a neutral site game or a road game. It's like, no, it's actually like basically a home game for you. If Texas has to go a long way to go, and if Texas folks have to get on an airplane and you can get in a car and drive there in an hour, well, then guess what? It's basically a home game for you. So,
well, the argument, if Alabama gets in, the argument that they use to put them in can't be an argument they use on anybody else. So then, is that an argument that should be used? And if they want to talk about, if anybody wants to talk about SMU not beating anybody, then are you going to apply that same thing to Texas? And if you are, how far does Texas fall? Because Texas has as many ranked wins as SMU does right now. So if you're going to apply that to one, do you apply it to others? And it's like a spreadsheet where you just spread like all of the formulas all across all of these cells and columns. It's like, well, I'm only going to do averages here, and I want to do sums here, and I want to do this one here and this formula here. You have to apply it to the whole thing, or else you're going to come up with some numbers that don't fit. And when you have as many cells and teams as you do here, and you choose to use different formulas to get your answers, then you're going to create some controversies. But again, as I'll state again from the outset, everybody wanted this, everybody agreed to it. So I'm sorry about team 13 and 14 and 15, but you had your chance. Everybody had their opportunities to get in. This is a much better opportunity than the Final Four. So, you shouldn't have lost that one last game, or don't get blown out to Oklahoma.
Boy, I've got to tell you, I forgot how long they string this nonsense out over the course of this is worse than the NCAA selection show in March. There you at least kind of get like, here's the number 1 seeds, and you get that almost immediately. And they'll sort of string it out. This is ridiculous that they're sort of stringing this out like this. But I mean, like,
how did we not have Oregon and Georgia already announced?
Right. Like you could put those guys in, where they're going. Oregon's number 1, Georgia's number 2. You know that. We know that. Everyone knows that. You could announce that. You could even put 3 and 4 up there, because who cares? Like if you just put the 5, even just put the top 4 teams up there, like give us something to, but this is how TV is now. They tell you the game starts at noon and it really starts at 12:19, or the Super Bowl starts at 6, except it really kicks off at 6:27. Like
Ward Manuel is coming up in 2 minutes to talk about what's he going to talk about without the bracket?
Yeah.
Ward, can you tell us stuff without telling us anything? That's what I do. That's my wheelhouse.
Yeah. Just to give everyone else a sense for what our timetable is, we have to go talk to Ryan Day at 2:00. So we need to be out of here by about 1:00. So this show will be over at 1:00. We will have we will have the field at that point, but we were anticipating that they would start getting to this a little earlier, and then we could have a little more time to break it all down. But so
we'll talk about it eventually.
Yeah, we will. Don't worry. We will get there. Night Person says Brown needs that dome ASAP so OSU can have these away games in Cleveland. Yes, I was thinking about that last night, that, boy, you could put the Big Ten championship game in Cleveland. You could put the Big Ten, you could put they can certainly bid on the national championship game. The national championship game was just up in Indianapolis a couple of years ago. And of course that was a year that it was Alabama and Georgia. So it didn't do anyone in the Big Ten any good, but Georgia has benefited from playing a lot of postseason games in Atlanta over the years, a lot of postseason games. So it would probably be, if and when that happens, that the Cleveland Dome gets built, that would be good for Ohio State. Ford Field has hosted the Super Bowl. Ford Field could certainly host a national championship game at some point too, if they wanted to. No,
I mean,
hosted the biggest game of the day yesterday. Ohio University 38, Miami 3, first MAC championship for the Bobcats since 1968. And then, Tony, how did they celebrate? By losing their coach to Charlotte.
That's
love it.
Now,
goodness.
And then I guess Tim Albin wasn't even like at the celebration. And I understand him leaving for Charlotte because Charlotte wants to be more. They will, they see the money potential. And so I think they're going to invest more than Ohio will or has or ever will. But come on, stay the day. I mean, just stay the day. It's been 60 years or whatever.
Yeah. Sigmund Nomad 1620 says Texas lost to the only good team on their schedule twice. Miami was taken out of the playoffs for less. Miami didn't lose to Georgia twice, but yeah, Texas's top 25 record. It's right there. They're 11-2 against teams not in the top 25 and 0-2 against teams in the top 25. So their strength of schedule is right in the same cluster as Penn State, Ohio State, Tennessee. Game control first in the nation because the teams they've beaten pretty thoroughly. But when they've played good teams, they have lost to both of them. So
yeah, and Miami losing 2 games by a total of 9 points is kind of a heartbreaker for them. But Tom, do you remember who predicted that Miami was going to be knocked out of the playoffs in the final game of the year against Kyle McCord Syracuse? Do you remember who predicted that way back before the season started? Do you remember, Tom?
I believe that was you, Tony Gerdeman. I believe it was.
Where are my kudos?
Sorry, they're putting up the thing right now to explain how the system works. So I got to watch to make sure I understand the bracket. It's so funny. We look at this every time. And at this point, like we've done so many of these shows going back to this spring where we would take, hey, here's who Phil Steele has ranked in the top 12. And so like putting together, here's what this bracket would look like if, based on this, just to sort of explain it so people sort of understood the format. So we're at this point, we're like seeing the code of the matrix where it's just like, okay, if this team is the 5 seed, this is, they would play in the semifinals in the Cotton Bowl as opposed to the Orange Bowl. Cause we've talked to all of the people and we know all of the things about all of the different factors. The only thing we don't know is what is the committee going to do in that room this weekend? So that's why I'm really looking forward to this. And I will have a graphic put together with the full bracket as soon as the full bracket is revealed. Right now, we're just waiting more time.
And I know people are like, why do they always go over this? But I will explain. Every time we do this or we talk about it on Twitter, there are people like, you've ranked these wrong. How do you, what's with your rankings? And some people just don't quite understand the conference champs getting the four highest getting the buys and why it makes everything look wonky.
All right. Number 1 seed, the Oregon Ducks, the least surprising thing. That was the free space on the bingo card. Number 2 is going to be Georgia. That's not up there yet, but Oregon, number 1 right now in the rankings.
Bold.
And they're going from the top. Yeah, number 2, Georgia. They're all year long, they've gone from the bottom of the rankings. Now they go from the top because the drama is at the bottom.
So I assume they'll go the first 4 and then they'll
talk to Ward Manuel. Yeah, talk to Ward Manuel. So Oregon will play in the Rose Bowl against the winner of the 8-9 game. Georgia will play in the Sugar Bowl against the winner of the 7-10 game. Now they have a resume comparison for Boise State, Arizona State, and Clemson. Strength of record rank would have them Boise State 3, Arizona State 4, Clemson 5. Strength of schedule ranking would have Clemson 3, Arizona State 4, Boise State 5. Win-loss record versus teams over 500 would have Boise State 3, Arizona State 4, Clemson 5. And, they have the key wins listed. UNLV twice for Boise State plus Washington State. Arizona State beat Kansas State, BYU, and Iowa State. And Clemson beat Pitt and SMU. I would be pretty surprised if Clemson was not the 5 seed, the 5th of those conference champions.
So basically, whoever's 3rd is going to be in the Fiesta Bowl between Boise State and Arizona State, and the other would be in the Peach Bowl.
I think actually 3 is Boise State. I think This is where all season long we've been assuming the ACC team would be one of those. Boise State is the 3 seed. I think that Boise State might go to the Fiesta Bowl.
Right. No, yeah. So whoever's
Boise
3.
State might go to the Peach Bowl. Because the Fiesta Bowl contract, this is all about the existing contracts.
Oh, it's Pac-12.
So the Fiesta Bowl contract, wasn't that with the Big 12 or no? Was that?
Well, isn't the Cotton Bowl the Big 12? Because I think Fiesta and Peach no longer have any tie-ins.
Okay.
And I did see Brett McMurphy tweet out a while ago that whoever was 3rd would be going to the Fiesta.
Right. So Arizona State is 4. Yep.
I've seen it different ways, different places.
Yeah.
So
yeah. Okay. So Arizona State 4. Now it would make a lot of sense for Arizona State to go to the Fiesta Bowl because it's right down the street. So yeah. So number 4 is Arizona State. Number 3, Boise State. Number 2, Georgia. Number 1, Oregon. This is not the rankings. This is just the how they're set up. Now, what's interesting is Arizona State is 12.
Yeah.
They're ranked 12th. So that means Clemson's going to be ranked 13th. So you're going to have only one team. It's going to be either SMU or Alabama at number 10. And then the first team out is going to be number 11, which is going to be either Alabama or SMU.
I'm thinking Alabama's out, but that's my
I
faith in humanity.
Yeah.
What a turnaround for Arizona State. And true, they were picked to finish dead last in the Big 12, and they did not look good early on. They didn't look great, and then they just picked it up, and Cam Scattaboo ran through everybody.
Clemson number 12, not a surprise. Arizona State does go to the Peach Bowl, so you're right. It is Fiesta Bowl for Boise State, Peach Bowl for Arizona State. The Peach Bowl is going to be noon Eastern on New Year's Day. So now if Clemson wins their first round game, you have a stadium full of Clemson fans playing like an hour and a half from home or something like that against Arizona State, which has to fly across the country. Not doing them any favors there at all, but but Boise State would, I'm sure, rather Boise State would rather be out in the Fiesta Bowl. So you give the
Clemson
the advantage.
They'll be an underdog against Notre Dame there.
Number 5, Texas. Interesting. Very interesting. So Texas is still ranked number 3, despite 0 top 25 wins. Texas is number 3. So that to me says it's going to be SMU over Alabama. If Texas is number 3, despite having 0 top 25 wins, then there's really no justification for putting Alabama in over SMU because the whole justification would be, well, Alabama has more top 25 wins, which you've now said very specifically that you don't care about. So now I think that tells me very likely it's going to be SMU over Alabama at the bottom if they're consistent, which sometimes.
And Notre Dame should be 6 then.
The 6th seed, and we're talking seeds. We're not talking ranking, but yes,
because Ohio State and Notre Dame can't move because they didn't play.
Oh boy, number 6, Penn State. Wow. Okay, so they really did not, despite saying that they could move teams down for losing in the conference championship game, or that resume matters. Boy, so now you have 5 and 6. It's right there in front of you. 5 and 6 combined record against the top 10, 0-4.
So
and combined record against the top 25, 1-4. And Ohio State and Notre Dame, 3-1 against the top 25, 2-1 against the top 10, both behind those teams. And again, like this is this is telling me bad losses matter more than anything else. Now Notre Dame's going to be 7, Ohio State's going to be 8.
Right.
Yeah, Notre Dame 7.
Unless they continue to drop Ohio
State.
No.
Well, they said they weren't going to jump. Yeah, but they're not going to drop Ohio State below. So Notre Dame 7. So Ohio State's going to be 8. So this is setting up very neatly a Ohio State, Tennessee. So we have Texas and Clemson already on the bracket. You're setting up Ohio State, Tennessee as an 8-9. You're setting up Notre Dame, Indiana as a 7-10, which is too bad because then you don't get to see the Southern team go north there.
Yeah. So Ohio State has to beat Tennessee to go play Oregon in the Rose Bowl.
Yeah, that's not official yet, but I can't imagine they're doing anything else there.
Wow.
I don't know why there's a long delay. They've already said that they're not going to jump Tennessee over Ohio State. Well, number 8 Ohio State.
They loved Ohio State's loss to Oregon all season long. So I guess there should be no surprise that they also love Penn State's loss.
Yeah. Yeah. Boy, Ohio State having a head-to-head win over Penn State, 2 top 10 wins to no top 10 wins. That is, I mean, again, as long as you're consistent with your reasoning, that's fine. But that's going to be, you've seen people all year talking about, why bother scheduling tough games if you're just going to reward a sort of empty calories kind of record. And Texas and Penn State being 5 and 6 are 2 teams with some pretty empty calories kind of records.
Good losses are better than, they're certainly valued.
Yeah. Having good losses puts you ahead of teams with bad losses, but good wins. That's where, that's kind of where things are right now. Cause it's hard to say anything other than that. Tennessee, number 9. So Tennessee will come to Columbus to play the Buckeyes. Next question, I'm sure, is going to be, so who's going to play when? Clemson, Texas is a pretty good helmet game. I'm guessing it's going to be Notre Dame, Indiana, and Penn State, SMU. Ohio State, Tennessee, that's going to be a night game, either Friday or Saturday.
Yeah,
they have not announced the times yet, but there's no way that you have 2 helmet teams like that and you don't put them in prime time, because you got to remember, ESPN sold the Saturday noon and Saturday mid-afternoon games to TNT. So those are going to be the games. Whatever Indiana's in, that's going to be a TNT game.
Yeah.
If SMU is playing Notre Dame, that's going to be a TNT game, almost certainly. I mean, it's possible that Notre Dame, the draw there is big enough that they put them in a Saturday, like a Friday night primetime kind of spot. But looking at this right now, Texas and Clemson and Ohio State and Tennessee are probably going to be the 2 primetime games. Ohio State and Tennessee for sure. Yeah. I would go ahead and mark it in pencil. Ohio State, Tennessee primetime on Saturday. Could change, could be Friday, but it's going to be a primetime game, either the 20th or the 21st.
And they may view Notre Dame as enough of a pull to not get totally blown out against the NFL.
Yep. Yeah. So. And Indiana going to Notre Dame, number 10, Indiana going to number 7, Notre Dame. So now we're down to 1 spot left. It's going to be SMU or it's going to be Alabama. This is going to be one of those things with like the reality show or the game show where the music's going to get real dramatic. The camera's going to zoom in real close on people's faces. And we're going to sit here for 30 seconds longer than needed. Waiting for the last spot. But just to run it through for you, number 1, Oregon playing in the Rose Bowl against the winner of number 8, Ohio State versus number 9, Tennessee. Number 2, Georgia playing in the Sugar Bowl against the winner of number 7, Notre Dame versus number 10, Indiana. Oh, here we go. Now we're doing the resume comparison. Good news. Tony, the metric, the only metric up there right now is schedule win-loss versus teams over 500. Why is it not teams that are 5? Why is it not over teams that are bowl eligible? The answer is shut up, because roll tide. Win and loss versus teams over 500. How many times have we heard that metric mentioned on these calls all year?
Never.
Well, now we are. All
it's
right.
Highlighted.
We're seeing. Yeah, it's highlighted. I'm waiting. Based on this, there should be no way that SMU falls out of the rankings based on how they've handled other conference losers.
For sure.
No way. As I said before, you can absolutely justify it, but if you're putting Alabama in over SMU based on wins, then Ohio State needs to jump Texas and Notre Dame, or Texas and Penn State, because they have no wins. So it feels like if the committee is going to be remotely intellectually consistent here, you have to put SMU in. Tony, you're not going to believe it. They're just sitting here on the graphic, waiting.
Is it loading?
Waiting.
Is it buffering?
Yeah, hang on. They got to get another 30 seconds. SMU is in Roll Tide.
And now can we please go to the Paul Feinbaum callers and see how that's going?
Baby, that is going to go. Listen, that graphic was set up to establish a narrative that is 100%. That has just launched. That graphic will be cited 100,000 times. That number will be cited 100,000 times over and over and over and over again by callers on the Paul Feinbaum show and on everyone on SEC Network. Yeah. Peter Burns is going to talk about the team's record against teams over 500. Tony, historically, the only measure of a team, their record against teams over 500. So I'm loading the bracket now. Finally had to let this thing go.
Looking at this, the two most difficult roads.
Nick Saban,
Ohio State.
Would
be Ohio State and Indiana, basically.
Yeah. Nick Saban looks like he wants to jump off a bridge. So there you go. Boy, there's a lot of orange on this bracket. Holy smokes!
Tennessee also has a rough road. I should say that.
Yeah. I think the teams that you wanted to avoid are Oregon and Georgia to a certain degree, to one degree or another. And it's not that these teams are unbeatable. Just there's a substantial gap between Oregon and Georgia and Boise State and Arizona State. I mean, a substantial gap. Good for Boise State. Can you imagine talking before the season and saying, I think Boise State's going to get a bye and they're going to be the third seed. Can you imagine? Arizona State's going to be the 4 seed. Alabama, no, they're out. Win-loss record versus teams over 500. Tony, it's highlighted again. Boy, maybe the committee will change their minds.
How can you only have 3 SEC teams in there? This is an outrage.
Well, and here's the thing, and it's going to be now the thing that people are going to say, and everyone's going to piss and moan about the fact that, well, you're incentivizing teams to play a bad schedule. And Alabama didn't play anyone great out of conference. None of their teams out of conference were Power 5 teams that finished above 500. It just their schedule was fine this year, and give them credit for playing Wisconsin, but Wisconsin was not a great team. You tried to play, and Alabama is one of those schools like Ohio State or Georgia where they try to schedule good non-conference games every single year. So you kind of give them the benefit of the doubt to a certain degree that you're trying to schedule a good non-conference schedule. And this year, Ohio State didn't have a Power 5 team on the non-conference schedule, but that's because they had Washington scheduled, and then Washington changed conferences. So then that series got blown up. They're playing Texas next year. Like Ohio State is one of those teams that plays good non-conference games most years. Alabama is one of those teams, but this year they just didn't have it. And if you lose 24-3 to Oklahoma, if you lose 24-3 to a 6-6 team, I understand why you're making the new sole metric win-loss record above teams above 500, but that's, the bad thing for the ESPN audience right now is that many of the folks watching TV right now probably have some element of object permanence, so they have not forgotten that Alabama lost by 3 touchdowns to a 6-6 team. And, if Ohio State dropped from number 2 to number 6 for losing by 3 points to a 7-5 team, I mean, it's not extremely unfair to drop Alabama for losing by 3 touchdowns to a 6-6 team.
Which is their third loss.
Yes.
And they've got 3 Alabama guys up there on that screen with Reese Davis and Greg McElroy and Nick Saban. So I assume I don't know what they're saying, but I don't know. Travis Mockery is part of the parlance there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so we have a bunch of Tennessee folks in the chat. Fred says Big Ten is going to get exposed this tournament, I think. Ball's probably excited about their draw. If it's Ohio State or Penn State in the first round, they match up well with both. I mean, good news. Good news. We don't have to do the everyone knows who would win thing anymore, because guess what? We'll get to watch it and we'll get to see it in person. Big Ten's going to get exposed. The Penn State team we saw last night, they're in the semifinals. If they play like they did last night against Oregon, that Penn State's making the semifinals. And, at that point, what does an Orange Bowl between Penn State and Georgia look like? Oh, let's find out.
Well, and I keep going back to leaving the Penn State game, talking to a Penn State fan, and he's just the Ohio State loss, and he's just completely beside himself, didn't care anymore, didn't want to go on with his football life. I'm like, hey, you still got the playoffs. I'm guessing right now, looking at this bracket, they're like, well, we're in the Final Four. And all we have to do is beat a Georgia team that looked like they did the other night. Like, there's no reason none of these teams in this bracket, other than maybe Clemson, should be thinking that we can't possibly win this, or that there's no way, or I think the stop Oregon is such a stop sign to a lot of people, but that doesn't mean that the teams in the lower side of the bracket can't get their hopes up. And really, you saw what Penn State did. They put up over 500 yards of offense on Oregon, so they're not infallible. And we've seen Boise State go right at them as well. So I don't think there's anybody here that's like, oh gosh, we had a nice run. There's no team that you should feel like that against in this bracket, which is kind of the point of the whole thing.
Yeah, exactly. And this is a team that we've talked all year about the fact that whoever wins this national championship is going to have the best resume of any team probably ever in the sport. Now, that might not be true of Texas. Texas could go in and win. Texas could go in and beat Clemson and beat Arizona State and reach the college football playoff semifinals still without having beaten a top 10 team. But then you need to beat Oregon or Ohio State or Tennessee or whoever it is. And then you need to beat probably Georgia or Penn State in the national championship game. So maybe that's not true of Texas. And if Penn State somehow runs through, it might not be true of Penn State. But if Ohio State is going to win this, if Ohio State wins the national championship this year, if Oregon wins the national championship this year, if Georgia wins the national championship this year, there's no argument that any team has ever played a tougher schedule than these guys will have faced, because Ohio State already has 2 top 10 wins. If you beat Tennessee, that's 3. If you beat Oregon, that's 4. If you beat Texas, that's 5. If you beat Georgia or Penn State, that's 6. How many teams have won 6 games against top 10 teams, and top 10 teams like at the end of the season? Mm-hmm. These are teams that are going to be top 10 at the end of the season. No one would have done that. And if it's Oregon's beaten Ohio State and Penn State, and they would potentially, they beat Ohio State or Tennessee again, and they beat Texas again, that's 4. And they beat Georgia or Penn State, that's 5. I mean, 5 wins against teams in the top 10 in the final rankings. No one's ever done that as far as I can remember. I mean, it's this. You can be griping and complaining about, oh, this team should have gotten in, or this team, oh, this metric says that, or whatever. Whoever wins this national championship, and I don't know who it's going to be. I know Oregon's kind of the favorite right now, and then Ohio State is, last I saw, was kind of the second in line in terms of the betting odds. Georgia may have passed them right now just because they probably have an easier path. But this is a fairly wide open field. How many teams in this field, Tony, could win the national championship? I mean, not like, well, listen, maybe Indiana gets hot. I mean, maybe let's do it the other way. Let's start from the bottom. Which teams are not winning the national championship? Like, you could pretty much say, I will bet my car on this. Clemson's right. Not winning the national championship. SMU's not winning the national championship. Indiana's not winning the national championship.
Those are my top 3, my first 3. And then we can start talking about
Arizona. I put Arizona State on that list. I put Boise State on that list.
Oh, yeah.
5. Yeah, 5. The other 7, I mean, I don't think Tennessee's going to do it, but you're telling me Tennessee can't get hot? And you've seen Tennessee has beaten teams in this neighborhood this year. They beat Alabama, which is kind of a playoff adjacent team. I don't think they're going to do it. But, I mean, 6 teams could win it, and maybe 7.
Well, and if, you look at Penn State, it's like, well, could they win it? All they would have to do is basically beat Georgia and then face an Oregon team or an Ohio State team or a Texas team that they already took Oregon to the brink. So I don't think you can say Penn State can't win it. So I would agree with that. And there's a good number of teams that can do it, and then the other teams that can't, congratulations, you made it to the playoffs. Your season was a success. And that those programs view this as a success. I think one of the interesting things here is that the committee is absolutely rewarding teams for making the conference championship game.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something that we wondered, is this still a thing? Because Kirby Smart didn't necessarily want to play in it. Is this still something that teams should want, schools should want? Is there a possibility of getting rid of the conference championship game because you don't need it? I think the committee showed that they still value that, or they will value that, which means you would assume they'd value it next year as well. And so there is still an incentive to make it to the game. And if you lose, don't worry. Although we have not yet seen a 59-0, and those are rare, but what about a 24-3, something like that? Would that, how much would that impact them? But I guess it is good to see that the conference championship games were rewarded, because that was one of my initial questions back at the Big Ten Media Days when we, talking to Rich Clark, like how do you keep from punishing a team that loses in that, and then will they get jumped by a team that's not in it? And we saw that, nope, you're all good. You get credit for it. Now, then that's also, they value making the conference championship game more than who you've beaten to get there, I think. And we know that they've talked about, well, making the conference championship game isn't another data point. It's not a feather in your cap. The feather in your cap is what you've done to get there. But clearly they are trying to bolster up making the game.
Well, I think if you look at the format of the field is conference champions get the first round buys. You have to win your conference championship game to get a first round bye. That's the only way you can do it. So therefore, that's, you're really making those conference championship games a point of emphasis. And obviously they truly believe that making that is really relevant, because they really didn't drop anyone. SMU they fell behind Indiana. That's it.
Yeah.
They dropped behind one team. That's the extent of it. And Texas dropped the smallest amount it could. Penn State dropped the smallest amount that it could. It fell behind Texas, which that's fascinating to me, that Texas gets the 5 spot and Penn State was ahead of Texas before. Texas blew it. Texas looked terrible in the second half of that game. Penn State looked really good in the second half of that game. Penn State was playing a tougher team than Texas, and yet Texas jumps Penn State. If you're going to look at anyone, and like I said before, you can sort of stack these teams in a bunch of different orders. I think if I'm Penn State, I'm feeling like I maybe got a little bit hosed here. It's, playing Clemson versus playing SMU in the first round, I don't think is a material difference. Playing Arizona State versus Boise State in the second round, I don't think is a real material difference. But it's not, there's not a real logical justification to me for taking a Penn State team that were they ahead of Texas? They were, right? No, they were behind Texas last week, weren't they? Was Texas 2 or 3? Texas was 2 last week.
Yes, correct.
Yeah, Texas was 2. So they did keep them in the same order. So there you go. So never mind. Disregard the last 30 seconds.
I think they're happy at 6. I think they have to be happy at 6.
I think they're fine. Yeah, I think 5 and 6. The difference between being 5 and 6 or 7 and 10 is 7 or 8 is enormous. That's that way you're not getting the Big Ten team. You're not getting the SEC team in the second round. And now you are. Here's Tony, where the SEC, plenty of losses on the field this year, undefeated in hypotheticals. SMU's strength of schedule is 75th. Let's not sit here and act like the ACT team is even remotely comparable to the SEC or Big Ten. If Oklahoma was in the ACC, they'd probably be in an 8 or 9 win team. Tony, the SEC always looks great in the comment section, don't they?
The undefeated in the comment section, because one, they don't like to talk about the losses. So that's going to help. But also, Oklahoma in the Big 12 last year, they did pretty well. Did not go so well in the SEC this year. We know that. But Alabama 3-2 against teams that were 500 or under. So those are bad losses. And so if you want to talk about strength of schedule, let's picking and choosing what you want to talk about is fine. and all these hypothetical matchups. But in the matchups that actually happened on the field, Alabama lost some that they shouldn't have.
Yeah.
And I assume they were probably favorites in all of those games and did not show well enough to get this spot. And so, they would have run through the Big Ten. We know that. They would run through the ACC. We know that. They don't play enough of those teams because even though they do schedule one good out of conference, that's only 9 Power 4 teams that they generally play in the SEC, as we know. And so maybe another good win would have helped them somewhere along the way.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you could either win another good game or not lose. If they hadn't lost to, you could lose to Vanderbilt and still make the field, but you can't lose to Vanderbilt and then also lose by 3 touchdowns against a 6-6 Oklahoma team. Like
Notre Dame lost to Northern Illinois.
Yeah. Yeah. You can lose one game and it doesn't kill you. You can't have multiple pant poopings and not get a repercussion from that. Like, sorry, that has been how the sport has worked forever. A 3-loss Alabama team that didn't make the conference championship game, just lost a 3-touchdown game to a 6-6 team. I mean, if that team gets in, that really sends a horrendous message, especially a year after Alabama got in over a Florida State team that was undefeated because the Florida State team's quarterback was hurt. Like that's, you don't get the benefit of every doubt every year, especially when Nick Saban's not there anymore. Like, sorry, man, that's not how it works. Girthy from Berthy wants to know, where will Georgia's game be if they win each? So in the playoff quarterfinals, Georgia, contractually, the SEC champion goes to the Sugar Bowl. So they would play the winner of Notre Dame and Indiana in the Sugar Bowl. Then the playoff semifinals, the top half of the bracket is going to go to the Cotton Bowl in Dallas or Arlington. That's because Oregon is closer to Arlington. So therefore the number 1 seed controls where that round goes. So they will go to the Cotton Bowl. Now, interesting that they could play Texas in the Cotton Bowl. That was a scenario that we laid out at one point. Texas could, theoretically, Oregon could put in a request to not be in the Cotton Bowl, but I think that's based on what the committee said. It sounded like that was not something they were really going to spend a lot of time talking about or thinking about. We got kind of different answers to that over the course of the year, but that's certainly where it looks like it's headed right now. They've got the quarterfinal matchups. They put the quarterfinal matchups up there right now on TV.
So Ohio State night game.
Yeah. Okay. So Ohio State night game on the 21st. Yeah. So that's okay. So Notre Dame is the Friday night game. So there you go. So the Ohio State game Saturday night. There you go. Dates and times and games are up. Thank you, Fort Wayne Buckeye. So, and I saw it late. Was it who was the noon game on Saturday and who was the mid-afternoon game on Saturday?
SMU Penn State is the noon game, and then Notre Dame is the Friday night game.
Yep. SMU Penn State at noon, and then Texas Clemson Saturday afternoon, and then Notre Dame Indiana on Friday night. Interesting. Well,
get them Notre Dame eyeballs.
Yep. Yeah, that was. I thought Ohio State playing on Saturday night was a very, 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 very likely scenario. So anyway, so to go back to it, we're assuming they have not put those. The fact that they haven't put those up there means that maybe there's going to be a conversation about it. But as of what we were told, it would be Georgia against Notre Dame and Indiana in the Sugar Bowl, and then Georgia against Penn State / Boise State / SMU in the Orange Bowl, and then national championship game is in Atlanta this year. So, you could have Georgia going to, Georgia is going to go to a bunch of places that they have already played in recent years. They played in the Sugar Bowl somewhat recently. They played in the Orange Bowl last year, and then they just played in Atlanta last night.
Boy, must be tough to be them.
Yeah.
Right.
Andrew says Tennessee and Ohio State is a really good matchup. Yeah,
that's one that we've wanted to see for a long time. Like when we do these fantasy, like who do you want to do the home and homes with? And Tennessee and Ohio State had a home and home that was scheduled for about 2017 or so, that got canceled with what the one of the agreements between the Pac-12 and the ACC and the Big Ten at that point or something like that. But So this one is it'll be a fun one. It is an interesting matchup. You got Tennessee with the way they like to go tempo, and Ohio State's defense is going to have to be ready for that. And I would also like to see Ohio State go with some tempo. And let's just have a shootout in December in Ohio Stadium, all guns blazing in terms of the offense and getting after it. But then, of course, Ohio State might see this as an opportunity like, we're not going to go tempo because Tennessee's already doing that, and we need to give our defense time to recover. And so we're going to slow it down. And this is how you combat Tennessee. And you know what? Just go play your own game. Don't worry about Tennessee. Just go do you. Ohio State talks about we're focused on us. Go focus on yourself. Play your game and protect your quarterback. Most of all, good luck with that.
Just looking through some of the comments. We'll punch up a couple right here. Ryan Dawes says Tennessee will be a really fun game for Ohio State fans. Yeah, that would be a lot of fun. Here's one from Tim Weinbrenner. Does it honestly matter which one is in? Neither SMU nor Alabama have a chance. Yeah, but here's why it matters. You just played the whole season. The whole point of the season is by expanding the playoff, now everyone has a chance. I mean, are they going to win? Probably not, but they have a chance. There is a path for a team in the Mountain West to win the national championship. That has never happened before, that they've had an actual honest to goodness, legitimate path at this time of year to win the national championship. If Boise State gets hot, they just need to win 3 games.
Yep. No, it all matters.
Yeah. Of course it matters. Yeah.
There's no juggernaut in this field, so everybody should have it. Feel like they should have an opportunity to get it done. Yeah. And really go into each game, and you're thinking, can you be surprised by anything anymore? From what we've seen this season, anything is basically possible. And Tom, you'll be interested to know that Ohio State is up 25-20 with 26 seconds to go behind me in the snow over Tennessee. We've had that going on for the last hour. Onside kick for Tennessee to see if they can wrap this one up.
Do you have so I was just about to ask you if there are lines out for these opening games, and so this is interesting. Penn State 8.5-point favorites over SMU, Texas 10.5 over Clemson, Notre Dame 8.5 over Indiana, Ohio State 7 points over Tennessee. The fact that these games are all 10.5 or less, those are pretty good matchups to me. I mean, I think that's a pretty compelling first round. You don't have. I was worried you'd have someone minus 21 against, and we don't have that right now. So
let's see what Texas is in the second round against Arizona State. But even then, I don't know that's going to be much different than these.
Well, I mean, Arizona State can at least score.
Yeah.
That's Arizona State can put up a bunch of points. And so, I mean, Texas has a good defense, but Texas's offense was kind of iffy against Georgia, and Texas's offense honestly hasn't played that many great defenses all year. So if Arizona State can get to 30 points, you telling me Arizona State can't win that game 31-28? I mean, maybe
not at all.
That's a winnable game. Ward Manuel says they looked at Bama's unranked losses. I don't know why they would do that, Tony. It wasn't on the graphic. It was highlighted because that's how they told you it was important. And it was wins above teams above 500, Tony, not the other teams. Don't look at that. Look at the graphic. It's highlighted.
It's like the CFP committee pulled over. They pulled Alabama over and had the sirens going and we'd like to search your trunk. No. Whatever you do, please don't look in the trunk. Why? No reason. I just don't want you looking in there. It's kind of messy. Please don't look in the trunk. And then boom, you open the trunk and there's 3 bodies and it's like, well, you're going to have to go to jail now. And
except in this case, it's Alabama's body 3 times. And
exactly. So yeah, they take them off to jail. Don't let them into playoffs.
Vanderbilt with the lead pipe, Oklahoma with the wrench. David Greenshield says Ohio State beat Penn State on their field by a touchdown. The head-to-head doesn't matter. And this is all the stuff that, there is a conference call with the committee later, and we could potentially ask that. But at this point, they're going to say body of work. They're going to talk about reaching the conference championship game. And again, looking at these rankings, you may not agree with what the committee how the committee valued these teams and stacked these teams up. But you can't say they weren't consistent. They were extremely consistent in terms of, if you played in a conference championship game, you really didn't get punished for it. And it didn't matter if you didn't have a great body of work. It was just, that's how, that's what they were looking at. So just to run you through again, Friday night, Notre Dame against Indiana. That's a 7-10 game. Saturday at noon, Penn State and SMU in State College. Saturday afternoon at 4. This is on the 21st. Austin, Texas. Texas hosting Clemson. And then Ohio State, Tennessee at 8 p.m. on December 21st. The Clemson-Texas winner feeds into the Peach Bowl against Arizona State. That's noon on January 1st. The Tennessee-Ohio State winner feeds into the Rose Bowl against Oregon at 5 p.m. on New Year's Day. Penn State-SMU winner feeds into the New Year's Eve Fiesta Bowl against SMU. And then the Indiana-Notre Dame winner feeds into the Sugar Bowl against Georgia on New Year's night. So
just soak it in. Just look at that. I mean, Tennessee at Ohio State at night, Saturday night in the playoffs. We've talked about it for years, and now it's finally here, and you get to look at it. And boy, it's going to be fun. So I think we will have to wrap it up because we got to get out of here and head to campus. So before we go, if you want to hit the thumbs up, we would appreciate that. And of course, continue to find us at BuckeyeHuddle.com. We'll be back with more later on throughout the week, talking about all of this, and we will be talking about talking to Ryan Day in a little bit as well. And we believe we'll be back. Tom, are we going live for that one as well?
Yes, we'll have Ryan Day's live interview live at 2:00 from campus, and then we'll do another live show once we talk to him and get a little more information. We'll probably have some more information on the bracket on the whole. Hopefully, no semifinal locations officially at that point. But yeah, we'll have another live show from campus coming up, probably figure 3 p.m. give or take. But the best way to make sure you don't miss it is to subscribe to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/Buckeye Huddle, and then hit the bell to get notified. We'll have a whole bunch more coming up there. And then, of course, a whole bunch more this week. Tony, we got to start watching a bunch of Tennessee games. I'm excited. Do they play any songs a lot that we're going to hear a bunch if we try and cram like 3 games in 1 week? I'm not gonna get sick of any songs, am I?
Well, here's my thing. I like Rocky Top, so I'm not going to get sick of it. But yeah, we can go back. We'll watch
the Alabama whole game. Pack of Rocky Top this week, buddy.
You watch the Alabama game, watch the Georgia game, maybe the Oklahoma game, and we'll find some games to watch in there. We've got some time, so we're definitely going to do that. So we got to go. Thank you all for tuning in. Hit the bell to be notified when we go live the rest of the day, and we will talk to you guys later.